and this is the 7th of September. You said these are some things that bacteria have to do in order to survive. So let's go back to that broader picture and think about living things in general. What is true of all living things? A lot of you said they're all comprised of cells. Yeah, that's true. If you go to your textbook, it'll say, well, they are organized chemically and on a cellular level and on a level of having organs, and some of you mentioned that. But I want to go to this one. All living things use energy. That's that food piece, finding a source of nutrients. Finding a steady source of nutrients, finding a source of food. There's a word that was on your vocabulary that we didn't really touch on yesterday when we were making our lists. And it's the word that I said was the hardest one on the vocabulary because nobody comes into biology knowing it, and it doesn't have a real obvious prefix, suffix, root. Homeostasis. Homeostasis. What does it mean? It's something, I'm going to tell you that it is something that every single living thing on the planet has to maintain. You are maintaining homeostasis right now without even thinking about it. What is it? Steady conditions. Homeostasis is about maintaining steady conditions. We're going to talk more about what bacteria have to do to maintain their homeostasis. And you got to grow. Well, all living things do grow. Bacteria don't grow very much. They're pretty small. They're microscopic. They grow a little bit from the time that they divide, but they don't get very big. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. That should be silenced, and I don't know why it isn't.
I forgive you.
Well, thank you. That's supposed to be silenced, and that's not a ring-through number. I do have ring-through numbers because I have a child, but that's not one of them. So, sorry about that. Okay. All living things grow. All living things reproduce, though neither that growth or reproduction are necessarily essential for an individual to survive. However, these two are really essential for everyday, instantaneous survival for every individual thing. Can you not grow very much and survive just fine? Yes. There are examples all over the place of organisms that maybe don't even grow to their full potential. If we look at my little, that pot right above the chemistry inbox is avocado plants. Every time we eat an avocado at my house, I stick the seed in a pot. They sprout. I think they make lovely house plants. In the wild, in the tropics, those things grow to be, 40 or 50 feet tall, and they bear fruit, and I'd have a ready supply of avocados. They're never going to grow to their potential. They're in a pot in Ohio on a windowsill. They're not going to grow the way they would in the tropics. Does it mean that those individuals don't survive? No. They're not even reproducing, but they'll survive until I kill them one way or another. So there are things that are important, that all living things do and that are important for species to survive. And then there are things that are like day-to-day survival. So let's go back and talk a little bit more about bacteria and how they become resistant. And remember, the end of this is we know how it happens, we know how to help prevent it. So what do bacteria have to do to survive? They got to stay wet. They have to maintain stable conditions, that is homeostasis. They have to maintain their water balance and not lose water to their environment, not dehydrate. They have to stay at the right temperature. Again, homeostasis, not too hot, not too cold. Too hot can change the proteins in their cell wall, like cooking an egg. Too cold can freeze them and their cells will burst. They do have to make more bacteria, though, again, this doesn't mean an individual bacterium will survive, but that the species will. That is an important distinction. And making more bacteria requires copying their DNA, making more cell wall proteins, and making more cytoplasm. Cytoplasm is the jelly in the cell. So homeostasis is something that every living thing on the planet, you, a maple tree, a bacteria, an earthworm, a blue whale, a mouse, a jellyfish, a smallmouth bass, that avocado tree, an elephant, you have to maintain homeostasis. Anybody here ever done any kind of work outside in the hot, hot sun on a summer day? What happens? You sweat. You lose water. What happens if you keep losing water and you don't replace it? You dehydrate. In most people, early signs of dehydration include things like splitting, massive, please chop my head off now headaches. You keep going. If you completely dehydrate, will you survive? No, you can die of dehydration. You can die because your cells don't have enough. This is often a problem with little kids. Little kids will get diarrhea and they can't hold fluids down, and so they give them something like Pedialyte. If you look at, or does anybody here have an animal, cat or dog? Who has either cat or a dog? Huh, okay. Anybody know how to do a dehydration test on their pet? Nose is one, but the back of their neck. So if you go home and you go up to your cat or dog, they'll think you're just being friendly, and you take the fur on the back of the neck and you gently pull up. It should immediately sort of slide back down. If you pull it up and it stays up, that's called tenting, and it's an early sign of dehydration. So when an animal has been, I used to raise rabbits in 4-H many, many years ago, and I had one who got really sick, and she didn't make it, but I remember my dad telling me, okay, no, you pull the back of the skin up, and then I've seen vets do that same test on an animal who's been sick for some reason, who's not eating or drinking. Every living thing has to maintain their water balance. Now, you sweat a bunch. That helps you maintain your temperature. You get thirsty. You have a sensation in your mouth, and you want to go drink something. That is a signal from your brain that you need water. Your cells right now are pumping water in and out of them. Anybody ever spend too long in a pool or a bathtub? What happens to your fingers? You get all pruny. Ugh. Your skin is exchanging water with the environment. You've got multiple systems to do that. Bacteria are a single cell. What happens if they get too much water in that cell? Pop! Yes, like an overfilled water balloon. What happens if they lose too much water out of that cell? Anybody ever make jerky? Bacterial jerky. Yum. Yeah, they don't have all the means that you do to control their water balance. They can move water in and out of their cell, but they're not nearly as efficient at it as you are. Has anybody ever heard of salting a cutting board in the kitchen? Anybody have parents who do that? They salt the cutting board after they cut, especially chicken? Yeah. Why? How does it get rid of them? Huh? Soaks them up? Actually, you're making bacterial jerky on the cutting board.
Because salt makes you thirsty.
Salt pulls the water out of their cells. They dry up. They die. Cool. If they can't maintain their water balance, they die. And up to a limit, they can exchange water with their environment, so they can do okay. But, you salt the heck out of them. That's it. It's over the top. They have to maintain their water balance, or they will burst or turn into jerky, neither of which is good. They also have to stay at the right temperature. Now, all living things have to maintain their correct body temperature. For humans, what's the average human body temperature? 98.6, somewhere between 97 and 99 usually. Some people have a low average, some people have a high average. Right around there. There are organisms that live at much, much higher temperatures. There are organisms that live at thermal jets in the bottom of the ocean where the water temperature is like 700 Fahrenheit, and they're perfectly fine there. You and I couldn't live there. It's outside the range of temperature that our body is equipped to handle. Bacteria generally have a range of temperatures at which they can survive. Now, back to that whole outside in the summer sweating, you get thirsty, you don't want to dehydrate. Why are you sweating?
To keep cool.
Yeah, Because water evaporating off the surface of your skin cools you. As long as the water can evaporate, it doesn't work so well when it's like 85% humidity here on an August day. But as long as there's, a breeze or something, as that sweat evaporates, you cool. That is one of your body's systems to help keep your temperature in the right range, to help keep your temperature from going too high. Anybody ever shiver? No? Okay. Awesome. Why do you shiver? Keep warm. Those little muscular contractions actually generate heat. There was a story years ago of a woman, she was a trail runner in Utah. She was young, 20s, 30s, something like that. And she was on a mountain trail. Somehow she fell off the trail. She ended up with a fractured pelvis laying at the bottom of a trail down almost a cliff where nobody was going to find her overnight. And the desert gets really cold at night. And she did, and I don't know how she had the presence of mind to do this, she did abdominal crunches all night to keep muscles moving, to keep her body temperature up. It's astounding. And somebody did find her the next day. She survived the ordeal, obviously. She was able to tell about it. You have to stay at the right temperature, and you've got a whole bunch of systems working for you without you even thinking about it to do that. You shiver, you sweat. What do bacteria have? Nothing! You get them too hot, guess what? They die! You get them too cold, guess what? They die! Yeah. You, elegant, multicellular organisms such as yourselves, you can do all kinds of fancy tricks to keep your temperature in the right range. Now, despite all that, you get too hot, guess what happens? You die. You get too cold, guess what happens? You die. And the upper and lower limits for humans are about 113 Fahrenheit. At 108, you're starting to look at brain damage. At 113, death is almost certain. And I think the lower limit, I want to say, is somewhere in the low 80s. I'd have to look it up. But once your core temp drops below that point, it's usually the point of no return. So there's usually no coming back from that. Bacteria can be killed by taking them outside their temperature zone. Why do we cook hamburger? That's why we eat hamburger. Who here has ever cooked a hamburger? Did I ask you this already?
Yeah, yes.
I did. Okay, good. You cook it till it's pink in the middle? You cook it till it's not pink anymore. It tastes really good pink, and if you know where it came from and you trust who butchered it, then you can do whatever you want. My house, we do eat ours pink. But I also keep a meat thermometer in the kitchen. And I take the temperature. We had chicken last night. I took the temperature of that chicken. Why? To see if it was hot enough to kill any bacteria in that chicken. Yes, it was. 165 is usually the temperature for cooking poultry, and these were all 170, so dinner's ready. Taking something outside of its zone where it is able to thrive is a way to kill it. So conversely, for an organism, staying inside that zone is what they have to do to survive. And yes, bacteria have to make more bacteria for the species to survive. We're kind of still covering the background as we talk about how we end up with antibiotic-resistant bacteria. We have to be able to talk about bacterial populations. So I'm going to read this, then I'll shut up while you copy. Bacterial populations. A population is a group of organisms of the same species living in the same time and place, able to interact with one another. In most cases, we say able to breed with one another, but bacteria reproduce asexually. They're not breeding with one another. Your gut has many bacterial populations. A tub of yogurt has many bacterial populations. A sample of soil has many bacterial populations. A pond has many bacterial populations. A puddle has many bacterial populations. A dog's skin has many bacterial populations. A tree's bark has bacterial populations. Get it? Pretty much everything and everyone and every place has got bacterial populations. So as we continue to talk about bacteria, as biologists, we're never interested in one individual. We're interested more in the big group. We're interested in the whole population of an area. So characteristics can change in a population. When one species of bacteria begins to exhibit resistance, that's a change in a characteristic in that population of bacteria. If we think back to the movie, when somebody travels across the globe, they may change the populations of bacteria living in or on their body, and then they can travel with those new populations. So David, for example, the young man who was in India, who got his leg amputated, the bacterial populations that he had on his body when he went to India were different than the ones when he came back. Here's a little bit of, this is one of those things that's all over news and science sources right now. The microbiome. Has anybody heard that term, the microbiome, your microbiome? Okay, it's kind of the big thing in the last few years. So think about planet Earth, and it's got all these animals and plants and all these living things sort of crawling, creeping, growing, hanging out on it. Now think about planet Tim, planet Leanna, planet Aaliyah, planet Abby, planet Logan, planet Aiden, because in and on your body there are more bacterial cells than cells of your own. Wait a minute. You're telling me that there are more cells on my body that aren't mine, that didn't start with me, than there are cells that are mine? Yes, that's what I'm telling you. You're a host to billions and billions and billions of bacterial cells, and you know what would happen if we took them all away? You'd die. You need them. You can't live without them. They can't live without you either. We'll talk more about that when we talk about ecology, what kind of relationship that is. But when you eat food, guess who helps you get the nutrients out of that food? Bacteria in your gut. Without your gut bacteria, you wouldn't be able to process all the nutrients in your food. Has anybody ever taken an antibiotic and gotten a nice case of diarrhea out of it? Thank you, yogurt. Antibiotics kill bacteria. Yes, we can say the word diarrhea in here. Let's talk about all kinds of interesting things. Aren't you glad you had me before lunch? I'm not sure which is after, worse before or after. Anyway, that antibiotic sometimes kills all the bacteria in your gut. Wipes out a lot, not every single one, but wipes out more of the bacteria in your gut than you would like. You end up for a few days until your gut repopulates, not able to process food as well as you would like. Your microbiome is really important, those populations of bacteria that are living in and on your body. Yes, there are populations of bacteria on these plants. There are populations of bacteria on trees. We have found in the last 10 or 15 years, there are those giant trees of the Pacific Northwest, my friends of the mossy, enormous woods. There are bacteria that are performing functions so vital that those giant trees couldn't live without the microscopic bacteria that are living on them. Really? Yes, really. So these populations of bacteria are incredibly important, and we're going to think about the bacteria that we discuss in terms of their populations, not in terms of individual bacteria so much, but in terms of how populations of bacteria change. Okay, here's what you're going to do. We're done talking. I want you to pull out that vocab. Timothy, you need yours back. I want you to pull out that vocab. I want you to, if you are capable of it yet at this point, add part C for any words that you think you now understand. When you have finished that, I want you to go to Classroom, and there is a recall quiz over the things that we have just talked about. So you're going to condense your knowledge, make sure you know what we're talking about, and then you're going to go do the recall quiz. Questions, comments, concerns? Yes, sir.
What are we talking about?
What bacteria need to do to survive, bacterial populations,